There is a specific sound that bolt cutters make when they bite through hardened steel in the dead of a silent morning, a sharp, violent snap that echoes like a gunshot across the frost-covered valley. And when I heard that metallic crunch at exactly 5:47 a.m., I didn't feel fear, I didn't feel panic. I just took a slow sip of my black coffee and smiled. Because 3 hired thugs had just broken into my family's century-old barn, completely unaware that Sheriff Cassidy was already sitting inside on a hay bale, nursing a lukewarm latte and holding a federal arrest warrant that was about to ruin their entire lives. 8 months ago, Corinna Sterling was just another power-tripping suburban queen bee complaining about the rustic aesthetic of my weathered red paint. But today, as the sun bleeds over the Rocky Mountains, she is facing federal charges for mail fraud, criminal trespassing, and a conspiracy to steal land worth $2.8 million in mineral rights she never knew I owned. The look of absolute terror on her face when the barn doors swung open and she saw the glint of that badge in the dawn light. Pure, unadulterated panic was worth every single second of the hell she put me through. But before we get to the part where the handcuffs click, you need to understand how a simple electrician took down an entire corrupt empire from his front porch. My name is Silas Vance, and this land, these rolling 15 acres of stubborn earth and swaying pines, has been in my bloodline since 1923, bought by my grandfather when this part of Elkhorn County was nothing but cattle trails and honest handshakes, back before people hid behind Ring doorbells and weaponized HOA bylaws to settle petty scores. I'm 52, recently divorced, and I moved back to the homestead to find some semblance of peace, spending my days working as an electrician and my evenings in the old barn, turning rough lumber into custom furniture, letting the smell of sawdust and cedar heal the cracks in my life. It was paradise, quiet and simple, until Apex Horizon Development rolled in like a slow-moving plague in 2019, bulldozing 200 acres of wild prairie grass to slap up a soulless, beige nightmare they called Whispering Pines Estates, a sprawling grid of cookie-cutter houses priced at $500,000 for what my grandfather would have called a glorified chicken coop. My property sat right in the center of their suburban fantasy like a jagged splinter, a stubborn island of reality that refused to be bought out despite their aggressive offers. But I didn't care about their money because this land is my history, and history isn't for sale. By 2021, the new residents formed the Whispering Pines Homeowners Association, and that's when the paper terrorism started, certified letters arriving in my mailbox with fancy embossed letterheads babbling about community cohesion and property value protection, demanding I join their club, pay their extortion fees, and follow rules written by people who have never calloused their hands a day in their lives. I laughed, literally laughed out loud, and tossed their demands into the burned barrel in my shop, watching the paper curl into black ash, thinking that was the end of it. But I didn't realize that ignoring a narcissist with a clipboard is like waving a red cape at a bull. That's when I met her, Corinna Sterling, the self-appointed dictator of this beige kingdom, clipping up my gravel driveway on a Tuesday morning in October wearing stilettos that cost more than my truck and a business suit that screamed real estate shark. Her blonde hair pulled back so tight it looked painful. "Mr. Vance," she said, her voice dripping with that fake, sugary sweetness that masks pure venom. "I'm the president of the HOA, and we need to discuss bringing your property into compliance." And even though I politely explained that my land predated her little subdivision by a century, and I answered only to county code, I saw a cold, calculating flicker in her eyes, a look that said she wasn't used to hearing the word no. 3 days later, the war began in earnest, not with a conversation, but with a neon orange violation notice zip-tied to my mailbox like a declaration of war. Structure violates Whispering Pines CCNR Section 4.2. Non-conforming agricultural buildings prohibited, demolition required within 30 days, followed by a threat of daily fines that started at $150 and escalated faster than I could keep track of. My barn was non-conforming. My gravel driveway was unapproved material. My pickup truck was a commercial vehicle display. And within 6 weeks, according to Corinna's delusional math, I owed the association over $4,200 for the crime of existing on my own property. But Corinna wasn't satisfied with just burying me in paper. She took the battle to the digital realm, turning the neighborhood Facebook group into her personal propaganda machine. posting carefully cropped photos of my woodpile and calling it a rat-infested hazard, rallying neighbors I'd never met to comment about how my eyesore was destroying their investments. It was psychological warfare, plain and simple, designed to shame me into submission, and I admit, reading those comments from strangers trashing 3 generations of my family's hard work left a bitter taste in my mouth that even the strongest coffee couldn't wash away. Then came the twist, the glorious, serendipitous twist that changed the entire trajectory of this fight. Because while I was digging through county records to fight her bogus fines, I pulled my grandfather's original deed from the archives and found something so shocking I nearly choked on my laughter. My grandfather, that crafty old fox, had sold off the surrounding land decades ago, but had retained the mineral rights to the entire original 40-acre parcel, meaning that every single beige house in Whispering Pines Estates, including Corinna's McMansion, was sitting on top of earth that, legally speaking, belonged to me from the grassroots down. I immediately booked a consultation with Elena Rossi, a sharp-witted property rights attorney in Boulder who looked at my deed, looked at me, and then broke into a grin that could have lit up a stadium, telling me that not only did the HOA have zero jurisdiction over me, but I held a nuclear card they didn't even know existed. We're talking about valuable subsurface assets in a region buzzing with oil and gas activity, potentially worth thousands per acre, and Corinna was unwittingly poking a sleeping bear that was sitting on a gold mine. My counterattack was surgical and absolutely devastating. I installed professional-grade cloud recording cameras around my perimeter, turning my peaceful homestead into a digital fortress, and then I dropped a bomb on their Facebook group, posting a high-resolution image of my deed with the mineral rights highlighted in neon yellow, captioned simply, "Thanks for building your subdivision on my land. We should talk." The chaos was instantaneous, a digital riot of confusion and panic as some neighbors, like the wonderful Mrs. Higgins, a retired schoolteacher who saw right through Corinna, started cheering me on, while Corinna herself went into a spiraling meltdown, doubling down on her harassment with a frenzy that smelled of pure desperation. She escalated, of course, because bullies don't know how to back down, and soon the harassment shifted from annoying to criminal, prompting me to file a formal complaint with Sheriff Cassidy, a man who respects the law and hates paperwork, who sat at my kitchen table for 3 hours documenting every threat, every fake fine, every trespass. "Keep documenting, Silas," he told me, his face grim as he closed his notebook, "because when this blows up, and it will, we're going to nail them to the wall." And as the evening sun set over my fortified property, the sounds of crickets were replaced by the hum of servers and the beeping of sensors, the prelude to a battle that was just getting started. March brought the thawing snow and Corinna's next level of insanity. A fire marshal inspection notice claiming my barn was an imminent fire hazard and requiring emergency demolition, a document that looked official until Mrs. Higgins squinted at it and noted that the font was the same one her granddaughter used for grade school projects. I reverse-searched the letterhead, found the $12.99 template online, and traced the metadata directly to a computer registered to Sterling Real Estate Services, proving that this woman wasn't just a nuisance. She was now committing federal mail fraud and impersonating a government official, a felony that carries prison time, and I realized I wasn't dealing with a neighbor dispute anymore. I was watching a criminal conspiracy unfold in real time. But the rabbit hole went deeper, so much deeper, because a quick search of the Secretary of State's business database revealed that Corinna's brother, Julian Sterling, was the owner of Apex Horizon Commercial, the very company buying up land for strip malls, and suddenly the picture snapped into focus. She wasn't trying to clean up the neighborhood. She was the advanced scout trying to force me into a distress sale so her brother could pave over my heritage. I posted this family tree of corruption on the neighborhood page, and the reaction was thermonuclear, with hundreds of comments demanding answers, 3 board members resigning in disgrace, and Corinna Sterling realizing that she had picked a fight with the wrong electrician. By May, Corinna had lost half her board, most of her dignity, and whatever grip on reality she had left. But instead of retreating, she went full scorched earth, sending me a cease and desist letter from a terrifyingly fancy law firm called Bradford & Associates, demanding immediate demolition and citing damages of $500,000. The letter was signed by a Harrison Bradford III, a name so pretentious it belonged in a Victorian novel, and it came with detailed surveys showing my barn encroaching 15 feet onto HOA land, complete with official-looking stamps and GPS coordinates that would have scared the hell out of anyone who didn't know how to read a map. But here's the mini twist that made me laugh until my ribs ached. I pulled my 1993 survey, compared the lines, and realized someone had digitally altered the boundaries, literally photoshopping the property line to move my barn closer to their subdivision, a level of forgery that was both impressive and incredibly stupid. When I called Bradford and Associates to verify the letter, the receptionist sounded genuinely baffled, informing me that Mr. Bradford had been retired for 3 years and they had no client named Sterling, confirming that Corinna had graduated from amateur fraud to professional-grade criminal conspiracy. I brought in Elena Rossi for the full retainer, blowing $5,000 of my savings. But watching her dismantle their fake legal threats was better than front-row seats to the Super Bowl. She spread the forged documents across her mahogany table like a general analyzing a battlefield and said, "This is organized crime, Silas. We're filing a Section 1983 civil rights lawsuit plus state charges for forgery and identity theft." But the real nuclear option, the weapon that would win the war, was found in the geology. Elena discovered active oil and gas leasing just 2 miles south, meaning my mineral rights weren't just a bargaining chip. They were worth a conservative $2.8 million over a 10-year lease. Armed with this knowledge, I went public, organizing a Save the Barn fundraiser at the local VFW hall, complete with barbecue, bluegrass, and a presentation that laid out the fraud for everyone to see, announcing that all mineral lease revenue would fund a community scholarship program. The turnout was overwhelming, with over 200 people, including Sheriff Cassidy and news crews from Denver, cheering as Elena projected the forged documents onto a giant screen, and the room erupted when someone shouted, "Lock her up," solidifying the fact that the community was no longer hers, it was ours. The backlash against Corinna was immediate. Her real estate license was suspended pending investigation. Her brother's company lost millions in contracts. But cornered animals are the most dangerous, and the next morning I woke up to death threats in my mailbox, my security cameras spray-painted black, and "Move or Die" gouged into my lawn with tire tracks. The gloves were off, civility was dead, and Corinna was about to make the mistake that would bury her, triggered by a breakthrough I found while sipping coffee on my porch and reading the full, unredacted 1923 deed. My grandfather hadn't just retained rights to my 15 acres. The document clearly stated he retained subsurface rights to the entirety of Section 22, a massive 640-acre square that encompassed every single house in Whispering Pines, meaning Julian Sterling's company, which I discovered had secretly filed for extraction rights on that very section, was trying to sell gas that belonged to me. They had built an entire subdivision on stolen land, planning a massive extraction project worth $47 million. And their harassment campaign was nothing more than a desperate attempt to force me out before I realized I held the keys to their kingdom. Elena was practically vibrating with excitement when I showed her the emails connecting Corinna to the geological consulting firm, proving this was a premeditated RICO conspiracy to defraud me of tens of millions, a plot so greedy it was almost breathtaking. We realized that Julian planned to start seismic testing in September, which required surface access they didn't have, explaining their frantic timeline to destroy me. But now, instead of a victim, I was the landlord of their entire existence. August heat brought the sabotage, acts of vandalism so petty and yet so dangerous they crossed every line. Power lines cut, internet cables sliced, anonymous calls to the IRS, and fake Yelp reviews destroying my woodworking business with claims that I was running a drug front. But my backup security system, hidden trail cams powered by solar panels that Corinna didn't know about, caught everything, including infrared footage of Julian Sterling himself, face clear as day, cutting my fiber optic cables at 3 a.m. like a suburban ninja who failed stealth class. The smoking gun, however, was the audio. My high-end microphones picked up a conversation between Julian and Corinna standing right on my property line, explicitly discussing how to make his life unbearable until he sells, and laughing about the fake inspections, completely unaware they were confessing to federal crimes on a digital recorder. I handed the footage to FBI agent Vargas, a no-nonsense investigator who looked at the video like a kid on Christmas morning, adding destruction of communications infrastructure to the growing list of felonies. We set the trap for September, knowing they were desperate to get onto the property before their seismic testing deadline. And sure enough, they took the bait when Corinna fabricated an emergency health and safety inspection, claiming my shop was leaking hazardous chemicals into the groundwater. The notice demanded entry at 6 a.m. on September 15th under threat of property seizure. And this time, instead of mailing it, she recruited a team, herself, her brother Julian, and a crony named Brody Finch to pose as environmental specialists, planning to plant evidence to frame me. My trail cams caught them rehearsing the raid, practicing with their fake badges, and I even recorded them discussing where to hide the chemicals in my barn, a conversation that sealed their fate before they even stepped foot on my land. I coordinated with Sheriff Cassidy and Agent Vargas, and we decided to give them exactly what they wanted, an unlocked barn door and the illusion of a sleeping victim, setting the stage for a confrontation that would end their reign of terror forever. The night before the raid, the valley was eerily quiet, the air thick with anticipation as unmarked federal SUVs positioned themselves in the darkness, and Sheriff Cassidy took his position inside my barn, armed with a thermos of coffee and a grin that said he was enjoying this way too much. I watched from my darkened kitchen window as the sun began to crest the peaks, painting the sky in blood orange and violet, knowing that in less than an hour, the hammer of justice was going to come down with a force that would shake the entire county. At 5:30 a.m., the trio appeared like ghosts in the morning mist, wearing matching windbreakers and carrying clipboards that couldn't hide the bolt cutters and evidence bags swinging from Brody Finch's grip. Julian led the way, arrogant and sloppy, while Corinna trailed behind, looking around nervously, probably imagining her victory speech, completely oblivious to the fact that she was walking into a federal mousetrap. They reached the barn door, and I held my breath as Julian reached for the handle, his confidence radiating even from 50 yards away, thinking he was about to steal a legacy, unaware he was about to forfeit his freedom. The door creaked open, the sound slicing through the silence, and they stepped inside into the shafts of dusty sunlight, only to freeze instantly as Sheriff Cassidy's voice boomed from the shadows. "Good morning, folks. I hope you brought donuts because you're going to be here a while." Julian dropped his clipboard, the plastic clatter echoing like a gunshot, and Brody literally tried to stuff a bag of chemicals back into his jacket, while Corinna just stood there, her mouth gaping open, her eyes darting around as if searching for a manager to complain to. "You're under arrest for criminal trespassing, conspiracy, and about 15 other things the feds want to talk to you about," the sheriff said, taking a sip of his coffee with agonizing slowness as Agent Vargas and his team swarmed from the side entrances, weapons drawn, tactical vests reading FBI in bright yellow letters. The Miranda rights were read over the sound of clicking handcuffs, a symphony of justice that felt better than any woodworking project I'd ever finished. And as they were marched out into the blinding morning light, the look of utter defeat on Corinna's face was something I will carry with me to my grave. The realization that her power, her money, and her arrogance meant absolutely nothing. By 7 a.m., my front lawn was a media circus, with news helicopters circling overhead and reporters broadcasting live as the Sterlings were shoved into the back of police cruisers, shielding their faces from the cameras they had once tried to use against me. Elena Rossi seized the moment, holding an impromptu press conference on my porch, displaying the forged documents and the chemical evidence to a cheering crowd of neighbors who had gathered to watch the tyrant fall. "This wasn't a neighborhood dispute," she told the cameras, her voice cutting through the noise. "This was organized crime disguised as an HOA. And today, the community takes its power back." I stepped up to the microphone, feeling the weight of the last 8 months lift off my shoulders, and announced that the mineral lease, now secured with a legitimate company, would fund the Vance Community Trust, paying for college scholarships, veteran trade programs, and a new community center. The applause that followed wasn't polite. It was primal, a release of tension from a community that had been held hostage by bullies, and seeing Mrs. Higgins wiping tears from her eyes while Sergeant Miller saluted made every sleepless night worth it. The fallout was catastrophic for them and glorious for us. Apex Horizon collapsed within weeks as investors fled. Corinna received 18 months in federal prison, and Julian was hit with a staggering 4-year sentence for RICO violations and ordered to pay millions in restitution. The HOA was dissolved by a unanimous vote, replaced by a voluntary community board focused on actual neighborhood care, and my barn, once the target of their hate, became the headquarters for the new cooperative, a place where we build furniture and friendships in equal measure. 6 months later, the air smells different here, cleaner, lighter, free from the stench of corruption. And as I sit on my porch watching the sunset paint the mountains purple, I listen to the sounds of the neighborhood kids playing in the orchard I replanted. We won, not just in court, but in spirit, proving that you can't bulldoze history and you certainly can't steal the ground beneath a man's feet if he's willing to stand his ground. But here is the question that keeps me up at night, the one I want you to answer in the comments below. Why does it take a federal investigation and a multi-million-dollar mineral discovery for a homeowner to get basic protection from a tyrannical HOA? Should these associations even have the power to levy fines and foreclose on homes? Or have we handed over our property rights to petty dictators with zero oversight? Let me know where you're watching from, and if you've ever had an HOA nightmare. Because if this can happen in a quiet valley in Colorado, it can happen anywhere. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories of justice served cold. I'm Silas Vance, and I'm finally enjoying my coffee in peace.